flashing,
on the
yeah,
screen.
when
Okay,
it's
good.
not,
Or
when
not
something
being
else is-
used.
Yeah. So we'll figure another.
Yes, it's interesting.
We'll get going here, because we actually do have quite a bit to do tonight. So I can't do any of the agenda stuff. We're just going to move right on to Penley with the quarterly finances.
So these are the first quarter results, so I just wanted to go through the highlights real quick, and then we'll get into the consolidated income statement, individual income statement for each program, balance sheet, and then the capital spend that we've had for the first quarter this year. So through the first quarter of fiscal year 20, our revenue is $163,000 favorable to budget. And compost sales are actually $66,000 favorable to budget, even after eliminating the retail bag sales that we had last year. So it appeared that that was a good strategy to eliminate the retail bag sales and sell, just to the business community. Net income was $26,000 favorable to the budget through the first quarter, and that's even with $215,000 of depreciation now in the operating expense budget, which wasn't there before. So the fact that we can put $200,000 of depreciation expense in the operating expenses and still be $26,000 favorable is really good, really good. And so I don't know if, just to background, if you remember, you've never seen depreciation in operating expense before. It's always been a last end of the year gap adjustment that was done below operating expense actually, and it should be up in operating expense. Our cash increased $486,000 in the first quarter. First quarter capital expenditures were $215,000, and again, we'll go into this in more detail in a minute. And as a little bad news, we're continuing to see erosion in the recycled material revenue that we have with that we share with Casella. So we were anticipating that to be about $52 a ton for FY20, and it's actually right now it's coming in right about 40. So, and that's having a kind of a double whammy effect, because it not only reduces our revenue, but it also increases the market stabilization fee that we have to make up to Casella along the way. So you'll see that impact as we look at the individual income statements. So here's the consolidated, and again, this is with all the programs included. And there you can see 163,000 favorable in income, and that's coming from tipping fees, solid waste management fee, which the tonnage, again, the tonnage for the solid waste management fee is higher than what we had anticipated in the budget up through the first quarter. So our cost of goods sold is just slightly under unfavorable to budget, but still gives us a gross profit of $151,000 for the first quarter. Expenses were unfavorable to budget by about $125,000, and most of that is due to the fact that we have depreciation in there of $215,000 that was not in the budget. So now that we're putting in operating expenses, it's causing the actuals to be over the budget. In addition to that $215,000 of depreciation, our materials management was also unfavorable. And again, this is due to the ACR being less than what we had budgeted, what we had anticipated, which is causing us to pay a higher a market stabilization fee. So now I'd like to just look at the programs. So the support programs, which again are more or less the non-revenue generating programs supporting the revenue generating programs, were favorable to budget. That total expense was favorable to budget by $97,000. A lot of this, the $21,000 in administrative services has to do with employee rewards. Taxable employee rewards is just one thing, and also salary expense. In O&C, there's some advertising and grants that we have that haven't been spent yet. So again, that's probably a timing issue, which is the way that we've allocated the budget this year is just basically straight lining it. So just taking the total budget, dividing by 12 and showing that for 12 months. As we go into next year, however, we plan to be able to make it a little more seasonal. So adjust the budget numbers each month so that they actually reflect, seasonality in the numbers and timing in the numbers. So we hope to do a better job of timing of expenses going forward. So as you go below to the operating programs, you can see that they were unfavorable to budget by $115,000. But again, you have $215,000 of depreciation in that number that was not in the budget. So actually, it's favorable, if you were to take out the depreciation. A couple things. The MRF was unfavorable by $167,000. And again, that's mostly due to the fact of what I just talked about with the lower ACR and the market stabilization fee being higher than paying more than what we had anticipated is what's driving that. So another thing that I did here at the bottom is that I'm just showing a very abbreviated cash flow statement. So, there's obviously a number of adjustments to go in here, but just for the sake of argument, I just want to show, total adjustments and what's happening to cash. So what the cash flow statement is doing is it's basically taking that GAAP created net income number of 311 in adjusting it to a cash basis number. So even though we have $311,000 in net income for the period, we actually had cash increase of $486,000 for the same period, which is really good. And as we'll see later, a lot of that's just due to the fact that we really have a good handle on our working capital, our current assets and our current liabilities. And we're doing a really good job of managing our receivables, as I'll show you in a minute when we look at the balance sheet. So just to go over to the balance sheet. So I just want to go to the bottom here and show you a few numbers. So these are a couple key metrics that are used to measure the financial viability of a firm. So the working capital ratio is are your total current assets divided by your current liabilities. In the business world, 2 to 1 is usually typically viewed favorably. That's considered a comfortable amount to indicate that you have liquidity and you're able to meet your short-term obligations. Ours is 6.5 to 1. So it's really excellent. And it's actually quite higher than that because we do have some, in the short-term liabilities that I show there, we have about 500,000 to 600,000 of actual long-term liabilities. So that real number is probably about 10 to 1. So our balance sheet is in really good shape. And then going further down, the accounts receivable days outstanding, that shows you how many days it takes to convert your receivable, your billing into cash. Our accounts receivable days outstanding is at 60.5. Most of our credit terms are 60 days. We have a few customers that they are 45 days, but most are 60. So again, that's an excellent number and just, really shows that we're really staying on top of our receivables. So any questions up to this point? Okay. So I'll go on to the capital. So here's our capital spend for the first quarter. So we were approved for $2,021,000 of capital. We've actually spent to date $215,000, which means we have 1.88 or $2,021,000. We spent $215,000. We have 1.8 million left to spend. This is going to go up quite a bit as you look down through what we've spent against our approved capital items. The Heinsberg is going to go up quite a bit over, so you're going to see a lot of that capital spend coming in the second quarter and increase that amount quite a bit. And actually of this 215, about 100,000 of that is carryover from prior period approvals as well for roll-off containers. So the other thing, the only other thing I wanted to show is the preliminary FY21 budget. So typically what we do with this every year is we take the FY20 budget and basically increase it by the CPI, Consumer Price Index. So what I'm doing here is I'm taking the FY20 budget and increasing it by 2.5% to show you what a very, very preliminary, sketchy look at our FY21 budget might look like.
And the key takeaway for the preliminary budget is, the purpose of it is to alert our municipalities as to whether or not we intend to assess a per capita fee or any other kind of a municipal assessment. And we do not anticipate doing that this year.
I believe that we do have to vote on it.
I'm always a little
I think
fuzzy on that.
we have done that in the past.
We have done that in the past, and I'm not
Isn't that
sure we
correct, Paul?
have
Do you
to.
remember?
We've done that,
We've always done that.
We've always
we've
done
always
it.
done that, basically.
I don't know we have to, but
Other than when, was it the first 7 years, there were assessments to the 6 or 8 towns that were in the district at that point. And then
So
Well, it
I
is-
would move that we approve the preliminary budget.
Second.
Any discussion?
Penley, are there any things that really stick out that are different than other years in this preliminary budget? Are there any big increases?
Yeah, not really. I think for FY21, I think it's going to be probably a little bit more business as usual than it will in the coming years. So, yeah, I'm pretty comfortable with what we have here.
We discussed it on the finance committee a lot. I just
Yep.
wondered if you had any insight that you.
Yeah.
And we will be looking at our MRF tipping fees. We'll be looking at maybe some of our dock fees, but we don't anticipate as well increasing the solid waste management fees. So we're proposing that that stay level at 27 a ton. We're probably going to budget for a few more inbound tons, though. We have been noticing increased tons disposed. So we want to continue to try to get a little closer to actual on that as well. But as far as the fees going up, most likely the MRF will be upfront.
Any other questions? Yes.
I'm not sure I understand it, just want to clarify. The 2021 budget that we're asked to vote on tonight,
Yep.
my understanding is basically we're taking the 2020 budget.
Yep.
and Each category, or each
Yes.
category, you're increasing it by 2.51%.
Yes,
But you haven't really worked out any of the details within any of these accounts. So if we
Correct.
vote
That's right.
yes, what we're really saying, I just want to be clear, are we voting for a cap, the maximum amount, or
This is,
subject to a lot of change?
this is perfunctory, truly. What we're doing is that we are letting the member towns know that we will not be requiring any funds from them in the upcoming year, and we're doing it now so that they can know that they're not going to be asked to contribute anything for their budget development. This is not the budget that we will actually have for
Right.
next year. We are swearing with, cross fingers maybe, that this is, we will not be coming to them, no matter what the actual final budget
Right.
turns out to be.
That's right.
So this is just a heads up for them, just to clear them so they can do their budgets.
And I think that this is also why it's not required that this board approve this preliminary budget. We have some scheduling things that we, I think, need to straighten out going forward, and we weren't ever actually able to do that due to our old accounting software. With this new software, we should be able to meet our deadlines a little bit more accurately, but we weren't able to do that for this year because we don't have a full year under our belt of this new system. So this is just, it's the same as this board has done, as, Bert said, for 20 years. It is not the budget that you will see. It will be different, I guarantee you.
And it is required that we warn the towns of this
Right.
prior to the end of this year. So it has to come at this meeting or before.
Right.
But
And normally you see this in
Good question.
November, but we did not have the November meeting, so.
Because I would guess that most of the towns are probably almost finalized on their budgets.
There's a certain amount of warning that they need to do before town meeting. Most of the towns approve their budgets in March.
Print their town reports.
Right. Right, and we have provided information for the annual reports when asked, et cetera, so, yeah.
in that case, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? The preliminary budget is passed. So, back to you, Ken. Well, are you done?
I'm done, yeah.
Get out while I can.
Okay, the agenda, we do have some changes to the agenda. Myers is not going to be here to talk about the shingle recycling projects. And because of a last-minute issue that's very important to us, I had to postpone Nicole and the presentation about Robert's Rules, board meeting, the open meeting law. That's going to have to wait until January. And in its place as agenda item number 6 is going to be the executive session. Those are the only changes to the agenda. So without any other requests, the agenda is approved by unanimous consent. Any public who wants to speak? Then I'll move on to the consent agenda.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda. Are we gonna change that about Heinsberg dock or something? Did I read that somewhere?
No. No. So is there a second? No objection. The consent agenda is approved, although the consent agenda does not need to have a mover and a second. I appreciate it. It is just if nobody objects, it is an automatic consent. So, we have to go into executive session now. We have completed already number 4. The preliminary budget has been approved. And does anyone have the wording? Who wants to
Actually,
raise their
Amy,
hand
as
to
secretary,
read?
you can read it, someone can then move it and then second.
I move that the Board of Commissioners of the Chittenden Solid Waste District go into executive session for the purpose of confidential attorney-client communications, where premature general public knowledge would clearly place the district, its member municipalities, and other public bodies or persons involved at a substantial disadvantage, and to permit staff and the Solid Waste District attorneys to be present for this session.
That's the best reading we've ever had. But I did notice you took a couple breaths and there's no period in there.
It's long. So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? We're in executive session. So who do you want to have here, Sarah?
Obviously, members of the public should not be here. It is up to you, who as staff
Are we, we're back in session? Go. Okay, we're back in session. The next item on the agenda is the Heinsberg dock and the inclusion of the Heinsberg dock into our SWIP.
I would move that.
I wanted it in the consent agenda.
Second. Wait a second. So Brent has seconded.
First issue is
Michelle jumped over to the SWIP, so,
there was a motion, I mean.
Yes, there's a motion, and we have a second. Is there any question or discussion on including the Heinsberg dock in the SWIP? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstaining?
good job, Josh.
Okay.
Okay, now I get the construction costs?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, but if we're doing this in order, the next piece would be the memorandum of understanding.
Oh, you have a different, that's why, okay.
I have a different version of the agenda.
That's where the confusion is, okay.
Well, this got changed
We
so
sent the
often.
second one, we only sent two, so the first one, and then today we learned there was another change, but we didn't have.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to use Sarah's, we're going to go to the official one, I guess.
So the construction costs.
The construction cost.
Sorry about that, folks, no wonder you were confused, now I get it.
What a thing to do to the chair,
Sorry about that.
giving me a dummy.
All right, construction costs for the Heinsberg Drop-Off Center. We were approved for $430,000. The contracted cost with Stewart Construction was $424,215. We probably didn't factor in about enough wiggle room in that, to tell you the truth, but we've had a couple change orders come through that I've presented in your, what's in your packet. We've had some direct vendor costs that also are presented. We've got some estimates moving forward as well that I've presented, which brings us to an estimated cost of $460,000. I've proposed $465,000. Just to give you an update of where we're at currently, the construction company has left Heinsberg at this point because of winter conditions. We have everything that we need to actually open the facility. We need to do some significant internal stuff first, so that's, you know, a good couple of weeks of putting cash registers in, hooking up the internet, making sure the compactors run correctly. The contractor will come back in the spring. They will be putting down the final layer of asphalt. They will be doing a couple tune-up things on the actual grounds, the soil itself, to make sure that all of our stormwater needs are met. They'll be seeding, and they'll probably put our sign in because the ground's pretty frozen at this point. So just giving you guys the heads up. And those were estimated in the estimate portion of this. So I'm coming to you, you know, full transparency that we've run above that 430,000, and to my best estimate, 465 will get us to where we want to be moving forward on this DOC. So that's what I'm presenting. Just as a side, our solar panel's in and will be hooked up by the end of the month. It looks at this point that we'll be generating more power than we'll be using at the facility, which will generate solar credits. We've optimized the facility as much as possible to use as little energy as possible, or power as possible, which is a good thing in the long run, will be in our benefit. And one of the reasons this project was a little pricier is because we chose to put, you know, a pole barn in and solar power, or solar panels in, which none of our other facilities have. So, you know, as Sarah indicated when we originally started this is kind of our hybrid. This is our newer version. This is our new look. So I just wanted to bring that out to you. I invite anybody to come out in the next month or so and take a look.
Any questions? Leslie?
Sorry. So, looking at this is really just a question for going forward, for thinking about these projects in the future. So, my question is, was the solar array and the compactor box, and the point of sale system not anticipated in the original bid or budget? Why would these be added in now?
Those were oversights in the original bidding process. It was not,
Well, the solar array was
the
included.
solar array was included, so the change order for electrical, the actual physical electrical line, the piping was in the wrong spot. So that's why that change order happened, is because they had to put, the solar array was included.
Yeah, I was gonna say
The directive-
6,000 is a little low for.
Yeah, and that was also our compactors. We put in more lines than we needed in the event we ever wanted to change or upgrade, because we have concrete foundations, it makes more sense to put more in at, $6,000 now versus breaking concrete or not being able to do it. So that's, those are the things that kind of were part of construction. But the direct vendor costs, those were the things that we should have had a better grip on when we cost this out, to be honest with
In
you.
the oversight, there was the oversight in the project plan that went out to RFP for including the point of sale system, because we do that separately from the construction piece. But it should have been included in the project price. So yes, that was an oversight.
So this is just a heads up for going forward, because we have so many big capital projects coming up, and this is making, we don't want to see this kind of thing if it can be avoided in the future, so,
Well, if I could say, it was handled by different personnel at a different time, and things will be more orderly going forward.
Right.
Okay?
Why does the booth window need to be moved?
The way it was designed, when we stood there, there were two concerns. One, the design plans, one of the sheets, the plan sheets, didn't have the window in it. So they had framed it and saw the design sheet, and then they filled it back in, and I said, stop, we need a window there. And the other one was where the actual attendant stands. The window was up high, so if you pull up in a car, you'd be looking up. So we lowered it as much as we possibly could with the contractor there during the construction phase. So he told us we could drop it 6 inches, so we dropped it 6 inches to really for convenience factor. So while we had kind of the building open, we said, yeah, we need
It's
this.
not like reorienting.
No.
Okay.
No, and that's kind of to Michelle's point. There was a
Yes,
couple things that,
The same came under the same
Yeah.
category.
And then this will blend into the next conversation, but I don't think we should pay for the gate, for the town. I think we should split the cost with the town, but I don't think we should pay for the whole thing. I think you're asking too much for us in the MOU, so that's why I'm alluding to that next conversation, but, I have just particular thoughts that relate to that, so I think in good faith, it'd be great if we could negotiate a splitting of that expense.
So we'll take that up. If we approve this, this would be a maximum. If it turns out that something else happens with the MOU, then at least it wouldn't be more. Okay? Any more questions on this? Someone want to,
I would hold we increase the budget for the Heinsberg drop-off center,
to,
465,000.
okay, I just wanted it said. Yes, there's a resolution at the bottom of the packet, and for the purposes of the minutes, please put that in. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Motion passes.
Yay.
We're getting there. Let me see the official. So now we have the memorandum of understanding.
Right. So you have in your packet an MOU with the town, proposed to be with the town, to address two items. And the reason that we did not include these two items in the lease is I want to keep the lease documents as standard as possible. And then anytime there's something that's unusual, I'd rather work on that unusual situation directly with the town, because those conditions may change, whereas I want the lease conditions to remain the same. So, the town has really insisted on us taking care of some of the stormwater features, swale in particular, maintaining that stormwater swale that's contained within our boundary, within our fenced area. So there was a lot of back and forth regarding that. And then also, to Bryn's point, they also wanted to make sure that they had access through our facility to the features that they are responsible for. Josh, I don't know if you want to describe kind of where that gate or that access would be, why it's important for them to have access to that, how frequently do we think they're actually going to need access to it, et cetera?
Yeah, so it's, as you drive up to our drop-off center, you know, it's oriented kind of a north-south. You come in, it's to the northeast side so that they can bring equipment through our facility and then access their Beecher Brook restoration project. They've got a stormwater pond that they can't really get to from their highway garage or their roads garage. And so they requested that in the event that it does fill in with sediment over time, that we put a gate in so they can make it through. There's not a lot of stormwater heading into that stormwater pond. I don't see them visiting it in the next 5 years. That said, if they dump a lot of sand and dirt on their parking area and it washes out and fills in, it might expedite the process to them get out there, but it's not an annual thing, in my opinion. So it's just kind of you know, we've written in, they would have to request access to the site, and then, you know, we put in the provision if they drive an excavator with tracks down their road and mess their road up and through our parking lot and mess our parking lot up, that they gotta fix our parking lot, you know, so barring that, you know, our exposure to them accessing that gate isn't that big. This is just more of a friendly request.
So is there any other feasible access to that area other than through our little stand?
Seasonal, they could go down through the floodplain area, but, you know, they would tear up a lot of their grass and it might impair their floodplain restoration. They could come from up top, but I wouldn't say that was safe. I also wouldn't say I haven't seen something like that done before.
So is it possible for them to put any kind of a access surface through their grass?
Pretty tight there, Michelle.
Yeah, I would say no.
Pretty tight.
To meet all their stormwater requirements, they probably couldn't. They can't change their contours based on how they're storing any kind of excess stormwater in that area, so I would say,
Direct route is through our
yeah,
drop-off.
yeah. And it's, yeah.
Didn't we
If they
preliminary agree to that meeting that we had down?
We were
in
out there, they said they
Winesburg?
wanted a fence, you know, and they were still, they didn't, they said they almost hinged it on their DRB approval.
Right.
You know, saying, you meet all our stormwater needs, our DRB approval will go through, and upon that stormwater requirement, we would like to see a gate.
Isn't that blackmail?
Working relationship, Michelle.
Evidently.
I mean, I think I don't have a problem with them accessing to do their own work. It would be great if they helped minimize or share the cost of the gate, because otherwise we don't need it, they need it. But, you know, being a good partner and a good faith neighbor in that regard, I'd say, you know, make the case that we would like to split that cost for the gate. I don't think that we should take on the responsibility of maintaining the stormwater swale within the boundary. But I don't know the site conditions as well as you do, so, I'm just thinking about permitting requirements, and to the extent that if there was anything found to be an error with meeting the permit requirements, then how would that fall out? I would say we wouldn't want to say that, like, are we completing the required, compliance documents? Are they doing that? I mean, it just leads
Good
to
point.
a lot of additional questions of, is that our job or is it your job? And is this being sufficiently met? And like, what's an undue burden? How many hours are we committing to this? Are we documenting all of that? There's a lot of procedural components that would need to be thought about to say, just in case somebody comes back and there's an issue, we can say, here's the amount of hours we committed to it, here's the dates that we committed to it, here's the work that we did, here's before and after pictures. I would just want to ensure a high degree of due diligence is done if we were to agree to take that task on. Again, I don't know the site conditions, so it may not be that big of a deal, but
Again, if
there's a
it's-
lot of gray area.
Right, if it's not that big of a deal, then why would language protecting us be a problem to be put in there? Agreed. I mean, I think maybe we put something to that effect. It's a 20-foot stretch, it's a divot. It would be something that we bring back to existing conditions, which wouldn't be difficult for us. It is where we're gonna put snow storage, so there might be some sediment that gets put in there. But as far as just a visual observation on a stormwater inspection, you can see, does stormwater drain there? Yes. But to that point, maybe we do alleviate ourselves of permitting requirements at the site, maybe a couple more protective measures in that piece. We purposely brought our fence line in to avoid almost every stormwater feature, except this is below the tip wall, this is where we need to push snow to keep it open in the winter. It's the smallest stormwater feature on the site, by far. But I agreed, maybe we add a little bit more language in there that's, just keeps us from being on the hook for the permitting requirements, as long as we can maintain it in its existing design condition, which wouldn't be difficult to do, then that alleviates us from any permitting requirements, and the town takes that on. Because the whole site is permitted as one stormwater permit.
Josh, my observation is there's gonna be minimal maintenance.
That's what, yeah.
Minimal, because of what it is.
But if a stormwater swale is breached anywhere, even if it's 20 feet, doesn't that compromise the entire stormwater system there? So whose liability does it become if our snowplows have damaged it and then there's waterway contamination? You know more about this than anybody here, Bryn. I mean, is that an issue?
Honestly, I would say Josh probably knows the most.
Yeah, as far as where our drainage comes off of our site, it's not the entire surface area of the site draining there. It's a minimal, it's why it's just a divot, it's because it's not receiving much stormwater. It's designed to a certain year storm, so that would be in the requirement. If there was any damage from us, I don't see, because there's a big berm on the other side of it, which is on the other side of the fence, that we couldn't really mess up. So all we would be doing is probably, if worst case scenario was we would be building up material in it, which would then push water back on our site, which would be detrimental to us. So, we would notice it quickly and alleviate it quickly. Bringing it back to an existing condition wouldn't be difficult to do, because it's not very deep and it's not very long.
And I would just want to make sure we're not.
I agree with the permitting and the compliance requirement is that we make sure that we're not on the hook for that. In any event, anything else in the site happens, it's.
What about the cost sharing on the gate? What would this board like to do?
We'd authorize Sarah to negotiate this memorandum of understanding so she can go back and talk to Renee. That would be my best thought.
I can go back and talk to Renee. I would be surprised if
I would be
Renee would
too.
agree
I would be too.
to any.
I mean, it's just my opinion, so.
And it's it's not very much money
No, I know, it's the,
in the scope of things.
yeah, I understand. It's, just needle, death by 1,000 cuts.
The gate, yeah, it's, it was part of one of the change orders. It came in at $2,246. It's already been installed, and that's reasonable.
So we're just asking the executive manager to go back and to look at the permitting in changes in the MOU for the permitting for our protection. And otherwise, see if the gate can be something.
I will express the desire of the board to Renee, and see what her response is, and I will get back to you with the response in my mid-month memo.
Okay.
This is the most important thing you're gonna do all month.
I want to wrap this thing up with a bow, believe me, I want to finish this project up.
I mean, and just to reiterate, I wouldn't say that, outside of the compliance things, I wouldn't say that the rest is worthwhile to bring back, in my opinion.
I agree.
All right, no motion on that necessary, since we're going to get a minor change, or are you authorized to, there is a resolution here. This, yes, I know. I'm wondering if someone wants to change it to include anything about a change for the permitting? Or are we considering that as a perfunctory?
Well, the language does say authorizes the executive director to execute the memorandum of understanding, which is indicating that it is the document as written. So I would recommend changing the word "the" to "an" or "a memorandum of understanding" with the town to reflect the additional language requested by the board and effective upon the town signature.
Can you know that? To reflect the additional language by the board?
Requested by the board.
By the board.
Should we be a little more specific? And what would you call the
Compliance,
compliance permit? What would you call it? What would you call it, Bryn?
Permitting compliance,
Yeah.
compliance with all permits.
Compliance with execute the memorandum of understanding in compliance with all permits?
I mean, it already is, so it's,
Including compliance.
Including a provision
Including
to
provide,
assure the town's compliance with its stormwater permits. How's that?
okay. A second?
Second?
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstain? Okay.
great, I will take care of that.
Now, we have the MRF sighting update.
Some fun stuff. To the point we just brought up, we're being very deliberate and very direct with how we're working through the MRF project so that we don't come back and say, ooh, we need 20% more, so that's why we're gonna keep coming back to you, and keep showing you every step of the way. So, just to kind of bring everybody back to where we're at here, we've been to you guys a couple times saying, do we want to build a new MRF? Yes. Do we want to own a MRF? Yes. Where do we site it? We whittled that down. I'm furthering that discussion here. I'm taking a different format, which some of you may recognize. This is a decision chain that was presented. I think it's a great way for larger projects to be parsed out, so that we can kind of bring everybody up to speed and you can see how things are going to be presented to you moving forward on this. So just kind of stepping through this decision chain. question to be addressed. Do we want to own a MRF? Do we want to build a MRF? At our retreat, we said yes, but there was a contingency. The board wasn't going to agree to anything until they saw cost. So that's but we acted on that. Is it aligning with our mission? Yes, and I just wrote our mission up there. Lay of the land, what do we know? So we've gotten to this site civil review. As I described in the memo, we had a siting criteria. There were 2 tiers. We whittled it down to 2 properties. One is on Redmond Road on property that we own. One is on Bowdoin Street in South Burlington. The owners of that are interested in selling it to us for the purposes of a MRF. So I just want to get you guys oriented to those 2 sites. This is the Bowdoin property. You can see 89 there. Oh man, I gotta stand up. So this is 116. So Kennedy Drive's over here. This is Tilly Drive for anybody who's been down that one. Meadowlands over to Bowdoin into our property. That's what we're looking at right there. It's roughly 15 acres. Dyna Power, which is right here, owns this big chunk. So we went to an RFP for a site civil review from the board's direction on these 2 properties. We're working with O'Leary Burke. They've been great. This is what they came up with as far as a footprint for that site. I hope you can see that. We would be pushing inbound traffic over to here. This would be where they would tip. Any outbound materials that would come through in large long haul trailers would be here. Parking for staff and employees would be here, or tours. This is where the office would be. We would probably have a scale house somewhere in here with a scale. The beauty of this site, which was lined out in the memo, is that we've got an interstate there and we've got a quarry there, and this is zoned industrial. That means we won't be encroached upon by residential neighbors. Moving down this track on this particular piece of property, it's been identified the soils are difficult to work with. This is Potash Brook right here. This is an impaired water course. That gives me concern for stormwater. You can design for a 10-year storm and get hit by a 100-year storm and have it discharged into an impaired water course. That is something that's concerning. Zoning and siting requirements, because we are on this scenic corridor, are different than what we would see at the property we own off Redmond Road. So there's some positives and negatives, and the fact we don't own this property. So the sellers indicated it would be roughly in the neighborhood of $850,000 to purchase. We've also kind of reached out and found that, let me go back, in this area here, there's a large residential development to be slotted. I think there's another one down here. So traffic is going to increase, residential encroachment is going to increase on this property. That's the lay of the land there. This is our Redmond Road property. You guys are relatively familiar. Here's Mountain View and 2A. This is the intersection. Here's Redmond Road. This is the IBM entrance. And this is the property we call Velco property. There's roughly 28 acres here. This is the laydown space road that Velco has put in. What we're looking at for developing the MRF would be right in this area here. Here's our admin office and some drawings. That's compost. So just to orient you, this is what we come up with to date. This has an ortho underneath it, so it's a little busy. You would come in to the site. Again, the IBM exit is over here, or entrance is over here. We would be coming in through the property that we own here. We would have two scales, an inbound and an outbound, to minimize queuing line requirements. And then we're pushing traffic inbound out and around the building to both utilize the slope here for noise mitigation and also to buffer us against the residents here. Tipping floor would be here. Traffic would then travel around. This is where the long haul trucks would be. This is the bale storage, and this is where we're going to have our processing facility with a 6,000 square foot office, and on top of that a 6,000 square foot educational area and conference meeting area. That's what we've proposed. Parking's here. As far as sizing goes, this tip floor is around 12,000 square feet. Which is roughly 3 times the size of what we have now. This internal area here for processing is roughly 30,000 square feet, which is about the size of our entire MRF. And then this is bale storage, which we'll probably have balers in here, is in the neighborhood of 12,000 square feet as well. So in the grand scheme of things, we're pushing 65,000 square feet. I had originally indicated that I wanted up to 80. I can't, with a straight face, tell you how I can use 80,000 square feet, to tell you the truth, so I think we're good here. One of our consultants' ideas was that we zone some area for expansion if we need to in here, and potentially here and here. But they're working on that to tell us, like, in the event that we move down the road and we jump from however many tons we have today to twice that in 10 years, we need to be able to expand. We'd also build this linear so that we have room to go up if we have to, which is what we've done in our current roof. So I'm bringing this to you because, and there's positives and negatives here, we're working around, these are class 3 wetlands. We can, with a letter to the Army Corps of Engineers, we can get through those. This is a class 2 here, and the buffer setback is that white line. This is a seasonal creek there, and it has setbacks there, so we fit it over here. I like this site in particular because we have all this area here for a potential admin building or some other space down the road. I guess what I'm bringing to you tonight is I like the South Burlington site. I like the Redmond Road site more. It has more benefit to us because we own it. And it also centralizes our facilities closer to each other, which we might see synergies with compost, using a baler, using a scale, something to that effect. So I don't really want a resolution because I don't want to not go back and review the South Burlington site, but I just want your guys' kind of head nod approval, I guess, to say we're going to focus our efforts that we're paying O'Leary Burke to review more on this siting criteria here. And I just wanted to bring that forward to everybody.
Paul?
Yeah.
What's the size of this?
Paul had
Paul,
Paul had a question.
So this will, looks like this will then eliminate our ability to store sand from the Heinsberg Sand and Gravel.
So we looked into that a while back, and this is kind of the conditions of when we moved into the sand pit area. There was a condemnation order for the former Heinsberg Sand and Gravel sand pit. There's a 30-year obligation for sand availability. The sand can be removed on or near its existing place. This started in 2009. We had originally bought the Felco parcel with a potential area for stockpile, but we have no legal restriction on land use for that. So one of the things that may happen is that we still have significant areas of land available to us, you know, where our admin building is, and current admin building, and next to that there's roughly 6 to 8 acres there. In the event we wanted to remove sand from the sand pit and stockpile it. There's also the south field here. Again, these are not ideal areas. There's this area here, and then there's this area here. So using up this does not limit us to what we can do if we actually want to do that. But, you know, it's good to address that, yeah, we can, you know, we can, if we want to go down that road, we didn't limit ourselves from that. Yeah.
What's the status of the 6-acre parcel that was offered to Williston on that?
So we met with the town of Williston a few weeks back, and they just wanted to know that we were still thinking about the 6 acre. So we told them that, yes, it is still top of mind. They are open to any configuration of 6 acres. They don't have an intended use at this time for it, so they're more agreeable to a less than ideal site. They weren't interested in that site because they felt it was too wet.
That's the site right here that we offered up.
Yeah.
Right, right.
Wet and would take a lot of work to get to.
Right. But we had talked to them about the properties where the current admin building is and then the property next door. So there could be some possibilities there that's a little bit less than 6 acres, but again, they were open to that. So we just confirmed with them that yes, we have not forgotten, and that we do still have some availability on Redmond Road.
So again, I just want you guys aware that that's the direction we're going. We'd like to go in. It's our professional opinion. It makes the most sense to go in that direction. So without any major objection, that's the direction we're gonna go in. So getting back to this decision change, we're right here in the communication, who needs to know and how. We're kind of keeping everybody up to speed every step of the way. The next steps really are, now that we're focused solely on the Redmond Road, if we run into anything critical, we can fall back on the South Burlington property. We're really gonna push our consultant to get us cost estimates for the construction of the facility. So in January, we'll have, and this isn't a full-blown design plan, but this will be a 50,000-foot view of what to expect. For building the structure that I showed you, it probably will look different the next time you see it, but it will be relatively close to that. So in January, my plan is to come back with you and say, this is our building cost, this is our site development cost, here's what we expect to have to pay in traffic studies and traffic impacts. We've already done our wetland review. It came back favorable to our construction. And so really that kind of would lead into the timeline and reality check. So that's January. When I bring that to you, my next step is from January's meeting to February's meeting is to reach out to a lot of equipment providers. I've got 4 that I know of that I've already prepped for this question to come back and get us, based on the parameters that we have and the expansion that we're expecting over the next 20 years, what we can expect for equipment and cost. And again, that's the 50,000 square foot.
50,000.
50,000 foot view, yes. I'm mixing my feet and my square feet. I'm gonna get the volume soon. So, with those 2 thoughts, in February, we'll have kind of a picture of what this thing's gonna cost. And this whole time, I'm trying to keep it under $15 million. That's not a hard number I'm setting, but it's what I'm aiming for. It looks, if we build roughly a 60 to 65,000 square foot building, and our goal is to stay under $15 million, that leaves us $7 or $8 million for equipment. And we'll have those numbers shored up, but that should just give you an idea. So, then we'll have kind of the payback on a bond and what that would look like and what that would do to our tip fee and how we would pay for it. We'll start those discussions so that everybody's kind of up to speed on what we expect to get and how we expect to get there. So that's kind of just my status of where we're at, and just looking to see if there's anything that jumps out at you, like, hey, don't forget this, or just seeing where everybody else, how comfortable we are with this.
So, looking at such a vital and critical project, how do we try to anticipate changes in the materials market from the point of view of new materials that can be, new kinds of materials for which there might be reprocessing markets, and, if you're looking at equipment, you have to know equipment to handle what kind of materials, so how do you?
We're looking at the most flexible equipment we can look at. So we don't have any optical sorters in our facility now, and optical sorters can be programmed to identify different resin codes, identify different transparencies. So that gives us the most flexibility that we can say, maybe this is flexible packaging, maybe this, we can shift or at least pivot more than we can now.
The technology will give us some flexibility. Having space to store bales gives us flexibility. We really, though, are going to be focusing on the markets that we know we have access to and will continue to be stable. And, where we can experiment, fine, but I don't want to hinge on that. It might be something more along the lines of newer materials. We might want to run a drop-off pilot versus a MRF program and see how that goes first. I would really be looking towards the customer question first. It's great that all this different packaging is out there, but do I have someone who's going to buy that? Okay, I might have someone who's going to buy that. Can I now sort and get them the quantity? So it's a little bit of it's not the material first, it's the end market, really looking at the end first.
So, again, you just introduced that concept of sensitivity to quantities. And will that change our attitude towards out-of-district sourcing, or out-of-district materials management? in order to up our quantities, in order to feed the markets appropriately.
Yeah, so, you know, right now, we're processing approximately 45,000 tons. We'd be looking to build something that could accommodate up to 60,000 tons, no more than that. But what it does is it allows us to get a better quality bale by not having to run the material through twice, right? So we'll be in a much better, I think, position to be able to determine some of our fate on that. I don't think we'll need to source more than what we're already sourcing. I don't know that we would actively do that. I think the pricing, however we price the tip fee, that's gonna do it for us. You know, we'll wanna make sure that we're covering our costs and that we're pricing appropriately. So I would kind of leave it to the free market. I wouldn't want to necessarily, unnecessarily restrict us to just managing Chittenden County. If we do, then we would need to look at flow control. Because we need to make sure that everything that was generated within the county that could go through a MRF comes to the MRF.
Right, I'm just concerned that with a relatively long time horizon for such a huge project, you don't want to unnecessarily restrict the quantities you can manage. That's where I was coming from.
For sure. And also, you know, keep in mind too, that again, as long as we have enough space to store bales, if we're finding that we're being overloaded on a first shift, we go to a second shift. You know, so we have that capability and that flexibility for sure.
Any other questions? Are we all supportive to this point, it appears?
So again, do we want to reiterate that what we're proposing is that we really focus our consultant, O'Leary Burke, on the remaining portion on Redmond Road to really dive into those additional details? Okay, I just want to make sure that we were clear, that that's what we're.
And we're pushing them pretty hard to get the information so that we can get as much as we can to the exec board and then have, you know, the civil site review side of this, the building construction, the site prep, those sorts of things, have a real good handle on what that's gonna look like to you by January. And then we'll push to get the rest of it to you guys by February.
And some rough prices, rough
Yeah,
costs?
absolutely, yeah.
Oh, yes.
Has the discussion been had with the town of Burlington about the possibility of this being sited there? And
Yes,
in the past, there's been some opposition to it, I think.
yes, so we did.
Especially with the residents, you know.
Yes, yep. So when we met with Rick and Eric a few weeks ago, this was all we were talking about, this and the compost project. So we wanted to make sure that, you know, we were right along, keeping them up to date. And, you know, the town manager has consistently been a supporter of CSWD and our operations and wants to keep us in Williston. So they have asked that Josh and I go to the January Select Board and brief the Select Board. So we will be doing that in January.
I'd just say for the budget management piece, not to focus just solely on the building, but also on the property site management with the 3-acre stormwater permit on its way.
Yeah, that's part of our civil site review is the stormwater, and that's one of the things, yes, we're absolutely addressing that, because that's gonna really define where we put certain things and how that looks.
Yes, Paul.
You're working on, excuse me, coming up with an estimate of the decommissioning cost of the existing MRF. Is that factoring at all in your calculation, something that we should be aware of?
So not yet at this point. So the, that will factor into some of the equipment needs because we would be moving the baler we just bought over to a new facility. We would move the glass equipment over to the new facility. So we would, once we're starting to look at that piece, then we would look towards the decommissioning. And it remains to be seen building. So I'll be bringing to you in January kind of a 10-year vision. You know, where do we hope to be in 10 years? If we're 10 years down the road, looking back, you know, where are we sitting now and how do we get there? So some different options for that facility will be part of that visioning, but that will certainly be part of the project because, you know, clearly. But again, we would be running everything in that building until we're turning the key.
Really, my point is there $1 million additional cost to take that building apart?
It
Something
will-
like that.
it will
That we would want to know about as we're entering into this project.
Yeah, and it would depend on what we decide to do with it. More to come next month. So.
And the equipment in there, some of it has resale value. You know, the stuff that is the high-end stuff, we're definitely gonna take with us. But some of those screens and some of those conveyors do have value to them. So they might not be the length we need for the new one, but we could put that up on the open market or see if the provider that we go with can take it back and do a trade-in.
That'll be part of the RFP. So, you know, we would have them evaluate all of the equipment currently running, and they would ask them to make recommendations for what could be reused, what could be, sold, scrapped, et cetera.
Any other questions? I think we're good.
All
Thank
right,
you.
great, thanks.
Anybody with any other business? And next month I'll have the right agenda. So I'll know where you are.
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. A second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you for your patience with this